Yes, $7.25 an hour is a starvation wage. Gotta raise it, in my view, to $15 an hour. Should we end the absurdity of, in the year 2017, women continue to earn 79 cents on the dollar compared to men? The American people say, no, we need pay equity. Overwhelmingly, and again, it's not my idea, this is how the American people feel. They think it is absurd that we are the only major country on earth, the only one that doesn't provide paid family and medical leave. The American people understand that we must deal with a crumbling infrastructure and create millions of jobs rebuilding our roads and our bridges and our water system. Not me, that's what the American people believe. The American people understand that we have a trade policy which has been a disaster and has cost us millions of decent paying jobs. We need to create a trade policy that works for American workers, not just the CEOs of large corporations. And on and on and on. And the challenge that all of us have got to be thinking about, we're not going to resolve it tonight, is to ask ourselves, how does it happen when you have a Republican leadership that wants to give incredibly large tax breaks to billionaires? We're talking about hundreds of billions of dollars, while at the same time they want to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, when the American people overwhelmingly oppose that agenda. How do Republicans manage to win? And I hope we can discuss that issue tonight. Because once again, all of the ideas, the needs of the American people, the progressive agenda is supported by the overwhelming majority of the people in this country. And why we lose elections is something we have got to think about in Georgia and all over this country. During the course of my presidential campaign, I talked about the need for the American people to think big, not small. To ask questions that you're not often going to see on TV, and the media is a whole other discussion maybe we'll get into tonight. To ask questions that most politicians don't talk about. How does it happen, as one example, that we live in the only major country on earth that does not guarantee health care to all people as a right? How does that happen? Are we dumber, less confident than the Canadians, the Germans, the British, the French, the Swedish, the Irish? Are we less confident than people all over the world? I don't think so. And that gets us into some of the areas that I talk about in the book. And that is, and you're not going to hear too many people talking about this, but I happen to believe that the great threat to this nation is the rise of oligarchy and the reality that a handful of billionaires, half of whom are in Mr. Trump's cabinet, that we have a small number of billionaires who increasingly control the economic and political life of this country. So what oligarchy is about is when you have a government owned by a small number of people who pass legislation and develop policies which benefit the people on top and ignore everybody else. And our demand tonight and our demand from day one is not a radical demand. It is the demand that we need a government in our state capitals and in Washington, D.C. that represent all of us, not just the 1%. We start off with a campaign finance system today, and then after people make their case and they argue the issues, there is a vote, and it is one person, one vote. That's called democracy. What we have now, as a result of this disastrous Citizens United Supreme Court decision, we have a situation where billionaires, multi-billionaires like the Koch brothers and others, are now able to spend as much money as they want to help elect candidates who will support the interests of the wealthy and the powerful. And let me tell you something that you may not know. As bad a decision, Supreme Court decision, 5-4 decision, as Citizens United was 6-7 years ago, Republicans want to go further. They want to end all limitations, all restrictions on campaign finance. So right now, if you're the Koch brothers or a billionaire, what you can do is spend as much money as you want on what we call independent expenditures, separate from the candidate. They now want to end all limitations and be able to give a candidate as much money as he or she wants and make that a direct contribution. And when you think about it, it means that somebody wants to run for governor of Georgia. Somebody wants to run for mayor, whatever it may be. And one of these billionaires will bring them in and say, look, here's the story. Here's a check for $100 million. You work for me. There's your speechwriter. There's your media person. There's your campaign manager. We are moving in the direction in which the billionaire class will, in fact, own and have as employees United States senators, governors, and mayors and members of the House of Representatives. And I think now about the men and women in my state and in your state who put their lives on the line and sometimes die in defense of American democracy. And tonight we have to be loud and clear and say that we do not live in a democracy when billionaires are able to buy elections. Our job is A, to overturn Citizens United, to prevent even worse legislation from coming down the pipe, and then doing something that goes in a whole new direction. And that is to pass legislation at the federal, state, and local level for public funding of elections. And millions of other people want to see is a political revolution in this country. And that means that we need people in this room, people all over this country, people who haven't thought much about it. We need for them to get involved in the political process, to run for school board, to run for city council, to run for state legislature, to run for Congress, to run for the Senate. Transportation or taxation or education, I just can't run. Well, let me tell you something. I work in the United States Senate, and I know the members of the United States Senate. they can become members of the Senate, so can the vast majority. Got to do is to revitalize American democracy at the grassroots level. We have to empower people. People have got to know a very profound lesson which you're not going to see on the TV too often. And that is, you all together are very, very powerful people. If you get involved and if you're prepared to stand up and fight back. You are very powerful people when you understand that democracy is not a spectator sport. It is not a football game. It's not a basketball game. You're not there to watch somebody else do it. You got to do it yourself. You don't need a governor and you don't need CNN to tell you what the issues are. You know why? Because you know the issues impacting your lives and your family's lives better than anybody else. And we need you to break through the fog and to stand up and say, hey, this is my reality. I make $10 an hour or $9 an hour. I can't make it. I remember a couple of years ago, I was in Detroit, Michigan, talking to a group of young people. Never forget this. Talked to a bunch of young people. They were working at McDonald's for $7.25 an hour. They couldn't even get 40 hours. They were working at a place for 20 hours and going to another place, getting on a bus, going to another place for 20 hours, going to another place for 20 hours. And what we have got to do, people have got to break through the fear and the hesitation and stand up and say, you know what? No human being today can make it on $7.25, $8, $9, $10 an hour. If you work in the United States of America 40 hours a week, it is not a radical concept to say you should not be living in poverty. Raise the minimum wage to a living wage. Amidst a lot of the bad things that are happening politically, there are some really good things that are happening politically. If I were here 5 years ago, and I were to suggest to you that millions of people would see their minimum wage go up to $15 an hour in cities and states all over this country, you would have thought that that would have been unrealistic. Couldn't happen. But because workers in the fast food industry had the guts to go out on strike, to demonstrate, and I'm proud that I was out there with them. What we saw was in Seattle, Washington, in San Francisco, in Los Angeles, in California, New York State, and towns all over this country, guess what? Minimum wage is going up, and sometimes to $15 an hour. Who are concerned about climate change and the environment. When people stood together at Standing Rock, they stopped the Dakota pipeline. For years, corporate America and all the big money interests and political leaders, both Republican and Democrat, said, oh, it's a great idea that we continue our disastrous trade policies and we pass the Trans-Pacific Partnership. But trade unions and working people stood up and fought back. Guess what? We killed the TPP. A story which is about a few hours old. of the things that I have believed for a long time is that it is not that Republicans are winning elections all over this country at the state and national level. It's not that Republicans are winning, it's that Democrats are losing. What I have been pushing in my own campaign and as a United States Senator is the need to profoundly reorganize and change the direction of the Democratic Party. To make it a people's party, to make it a grassroots party, to open the doors for everybody in this room to come in and get involved and help shape the policies for your community, your state, and your nation. Well, a couple of weeks ago, I suggested to my colleagues in the Senate that for the first time in the modern history of the Democratic Party, that maybe instead of just hanging around Capitol Hill in Washington, maybe we get out in communities and we stand up and fight back against Republican efforts to end the Affordable Care Act and throw 20 million people off of it. This is a new approach for the Democrats. They're not used to doing this, and we talked. And we had the support of the leadership of the Democratic Party, Senate. And we said, okay, look, we're starting this thing off. Maybe we'll be able to do 5 rallies. Maybe we'll be able to do 10 rallies. We don't know. We don't know how many people will come out. I am happy to report to you that today, I was earlier today in Macomb County, Michigan, just flew in from Detroit. We had 8,000 people out in the rally. My friend and colleague Elizabeth Warren tells me that she had 5,000 people out in Boston. And it turns out that we had rallies in 70 communities throughout America. So to the Republican leadership's dismay, the word is getting out that it is not acceptable to throw up to 30 million people off of health insurance, to privatize Medicare and make it into a voucher program, to make devastating cuts to Medicaid, which will hurt low-income people and even middle-class people who pay for nursing home care for their parents through Medicaid. It is not acceptable if you repeal the Affordable Care Act to raise the cost of prescription drugs for seniors. It is not acceptable to defund Planned Parenthood. Would provide $346 billion in tax breaks for the top 2%. Yay! So what we showed today, and I'm sure my Republican colleagues in Washington are not happy about it, but what we showed is the American people are beginning to stand up and fight back. And when we do that, there's nothing that we're not going to be able to do about it. Mr. Trump comes into office. Let me say a few things. Number one, despair is not an option. Too many people say, oh man, this is awful. I give up. I'm not going to be involved. Martin Luther King Jr. birthday we honor this weekend. I'm going to be at the King Center tomorrow. He reminded us, if there's anything that he reminded us, is that real change never comes from on top. It always comes from the grassroots and the bottom. That's true of the civil rights movement, when millions of people stood up and fought back. It is true of the women's movement. Many children don't know, they really don't know, that 100 years ago today, women in America were not running for president. They did not have the right to vote. They did not have the right to go to the schools or get the education they wanted, do the work that they wanted, could not control their own property in a divorce proceeding. But women, by the millions with their male allies, stood up and said that in America, women will not be second-class citizens. That change didn't happen from somebody signing a bill. It happened because billions of women and men demanded that change. If I were here 5 years ago, and I would suggest to you that gay marriage would be legal in 50 states in this country, you would have thought that I had smoked something, which is another issue. Same as the civil rights movement, same as the women's movement. It starts at the grassroots with some very brave people who are prepared to get beaten, go to jail, sometimes get killed, in order to say that in America, people have the right to love whomever they want, regardless of their gender. What the establishment tries to do in a million different ways is to always tell us that real profound change is impossible. It can't happen. And to the degree that people end up believing that and only think in small ways, real change never comes about. And our job is to have the psychological courage to go outside of status quo thinking and to think big, to think about where we can be going as a country, socially, environmentally, economically. And when we do that, and when we have the guts, and this is the hard stuff, not only to think big, but to really mess it up and start taking on very powerful, wealthy special interests. All right? Can we, at a time when the scientists are very clear that climate change is real, it is caused by human activity, it is already doing devastating harm to our country and the world, can we transform our energy system away from fossil fuel to energy efficiency and sustainable energy? And you know what the answer is? Yes! Unbelievable potential in solar, in wind, in geothermal, and other technologies that are now being developed. But the job there is not only to think big, the job there is to take on the fossil fuel industry, whose greed is such that they are prepared to destroy this planet in order to gain short-term profits. So we got to stand up. We got to be united, and especially at the time, in the time of Trump, when his nominee to be head of the first nominee, and I'll be chatting with him next week at a hearing, he is the first. environmental protection agency who does not believe in environmental protection. So the American people have got to stand behind those of us in the Senate who will say no to that disastrous nomination. One of the points that is not made often enough, and that's not an accident. It's not made by the media, it's not made by the think tanks, it's not made by politicians, is that this nation today is the wealthiest nation in the history of the world. You all know that? Now, if we were a poor nation, God knows there are poor nations all over the world, we would have a certain type of discussion. And the discussion would say, well, look, yeah, it would be great if everybody could have health care, but we're a poor nation. We cannot afford the doctors and the nurses and the medicine that we need. Sorry, we're poor. Yeah, we'd like to rebuild our infrastructure. It'd be great if everybody could have clean drinking water, if our roads were good, our bridges were good. We're too poor. We can't do it. We are the richest nation in the history of the world. Problem is that almost all of that wealth is owned by a handful of people at the top. Problem is that 52% of all new income generated today goes to the top 1%. Problem is that most people don't know that we are the wealthiest country in the history of the world because they're working 50 or 60 hours a week trying to put bread on the table and take care of their kids. They don't know we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world because they're graduating college or graduate school $50,000 or $100,000 in debt. They don't know we're the wealthiest nation because they're working in my state, not uncommon for people to work in 2 or 3 jobs trying to cobble together the income that they need and the health care they need. They don't know we're the wealthiest nation because a single mom out there is trying to figure out how she can pay $10,000, $15,000 a year for child care for her baby when she's only making $30,000 or $40,000 a year. People don't know we're the wealthiest nation in the history of the world because you may be one of the 50% of older workers, 50% of older workers who have zero in the bank as they face retirement. Zero in the bank. And you may not know how wealthy this nation is because maybe you are a worker in a factory which shut down and went to Mexico where they paid people $3 an hour, China where they paid them less, and maybe you're working at a fast food place at the age of 50 making $9 an hour. Or maybe you're one of the 28 million Americans who have no health insurance. Or the many more who do have insurance, but the deductibles and co-payments are so high, you still can't afford to go to the doctor. So what we have got to do as a nation, this is precisely what the book is about, is to lay those issues and more on the table. And then say, why not? Why not? Why not means that there is no rational reason for us to pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs other than the incredible greed of the pharmaceutical industry. There is no reason for us not to have the funding we need and to think through creating great schools in inner cities and in rural areas of this country. When people tell us we don't have the money to do that, you remind them that we lose $100 billion every year from corporations who stash their profits in the Cayman Islands and Bermuda, and at the end of a given year, do not pay a nickel in federal taxes. And you don't have to look further than the President-elect of the United States. Told with great pride the American people that, yeah, he doesn't have, he's a billionaire, he lives in the lap of luxury, has mansions all over the world, he doesn't have to pay a nickel in federal taxes. So where we are right now is a pivotal moment in American history. And the antidote to our problems, in my view, is that millions of people must become engaged in an unprecedented way in the political process. I'll give you another example of why we have to do this. What I do in the book, let me get to the book for a moment. What I do in the book is just take issue after issue and say, here are the problems, here in my view are the solutions. You may disagree with my selection of issues, you may disagree with the solutions that I pose. But I think that is the kind of debate that we have to have. We'll give you a couple more examples of issues that we don't talk enough about. We have a criminal justice system which is completely broken. What does it mean? It means that today we have some 2.2 million Americans behind bars at the local, state, and federal level. 2.2 million people. That is more people in jail than any other country on earth, including China, a communist authoritarian country 4 times our size. Why? Why do we have so many people, disproportionately African American, Latino, and Native American? Why do we have so many people in jail? Well, one thing I do know is that it makes a hell of a lot more sense for us to be investing in jobs and education rather than more jails and more incarceration. It's not only the 2.2 million people who are suffering. It is the children that they have, the wives, the husbands, the family that they left behind. So we have got to begin to think through why it is that we have so many people in jail, why there is so much despair in this country. I'll tell you another story I talked about. And that has to do not with the African American community, not with the Latino community, not with the Native American community. Happens to deal with the white working class of this country. For the first time in the modern history of America, life expectancy, how long people live among white working class people, is actually in decline. Think about it. People, historically, what always happens is that my generation lives longer than my parents' generation lives longer than their parents because of new medical technology and drugs and public health. That's what happens. But right now, you've got millions of people who are dying at a younger age than their parents. They are turning to opiates, they are turning to heroin, they are turning to alcohol, they are turning to suicide. Why? What is going on in America that people feel such pain that they're unable to cope with their daily lives and are turning to drugs or suicide as a way out? It's an issue that we have got to talk about. We need police department reform. We need to make it clear, and we can do this. I was a mayor for 8 years, and I worked very closely with my police department. Vast majority of police officers are honest and hardworking and have a very, very difficult job today. It is really not easy to come today. But what we need is training, starting at the federal level, to explain to police departments all over this country that lethal force is the last response, not the first response. And we have to, and by the way, as a result of grassroots activity, we are taking a hard look at the war, so-called war on drugs. Over the last 20, 30 years, millions of people have been arrested for possession of marijuana. And this, by the way, becomes a racial issue because it turns out that the black community and the white community do marijuana at about equal rates. Blacks, however, are 4 times more likely to be arrested than whites. And when you have a criminal record, even for something as innocuous as smoking pot, you know what? It may become harder for you to go out and get a job. And if you can't go out and get a job after a few years, you may be turning to other ways to make money, which are illegal and will get you into even more trouble. So we've got to take a whole hard look at the so-called war on drugs. And as you know, by the way, the trend is very clear. And that is in state after state in recent years, we're seeing a movement toward the legalization of recreational marijuana. And when we talk about criminal justice, we have also got to take a hard look at what happens to people when they are in jail and why the rate of recidivism is as high as it is. And obviously, I'll never forget, I was in Iowa a couple of years ago. We had a panel on criminal justice. We had 2 guys up there who served time. And one guy says, he said, I remember this like it was yesterday. He said, somebody came into my cell and they said, you're getting out tomorrow. Here is a check for $75, lots of luck. Well, guess what? He ended up back in jail. Not too surprising, because if you do not provide the job training and the education, you don't change the environment which people re-enter, it is very likely the results will be exactly the same. So you've got to take a hard look at that. And then there's another big issue, which I worry about a whole lot, with Trump coming into the presidency. And that is the need for comprehensive immigration reform. What demagogues always do is they need to create a group of people to hate. Always a minority. And then what they tell the majority, they say, hey, you don't have enough money, you don't have any health care, you can't send your kids to college. That's the reason why. It's that black worker over there, that Latino over there, or that Muslim over there. That's the cause. Or maybe it's China or Russia, whatever it is. There's always somebody out there that we are supposed to hate. And we get involved into that hate cycle. Well, everybody's getting whipped up, supposed to hate this person or that person. We forget that they're taking away our Social Security and our health care and the attachment to billions. The crises that we face today, and there are many, and I worry deeply about them. The crises that we face were made by human decisions. Somebody made a decision. those crises can be addressed further by human decisions, by people coming together and saying, you know what, that decision was wrong. That decision was wrong, and we're going to change our public policy. But it will not happen. I'll give you just one example, and I can give you a million. The crooks on Wall Street who destroyed our economy. Shock of all shocks. Some kid here in Atlanta can get picked up with marijuana and get a criminal record, but not one of the major players on Wall Street whose greed, recklessness, and illegal behavior destroyed this economy, not one of them got a criminal record. Isn't that shocking? Isn't that something? They pay, by the way, billions of dollars in fines, tens of billions of dollars. Every major financial institution paid a very significant fine. And yet not one CEO ended up going to jail. Pharmaceutical industry can raise the prices. You're on a medicine, maybe you have a chronic illness, you've been taking the medicine for 10 years, they could double or triple the price of that medicine. And we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. Virtually every major drug company has also been fined for illegal activity. But yet we cannot generate the support in Congress to take them on and to lower the price of medicine in this country, because they have 1,400 paid lobbyists and spend hundreds of millions of dollars over a period of years giving campaign contributions to candidates. So we have a lot of work on our hands. But I will tell you that I am not pessimistic about the future of this country, because I've been to too many meetings like this, where I have seen beautiful, beautiful people, people of all colors, all nationalities, people who are young, people who are old, people who are working long and hard hours, who love this country deeply, as we all do, and are determined to do everything they can to be the patriots that they are and to transform this country and make us into the nation that you and I know we can become. Questions. I think we'll bring up Frank Reese now. Where are you? Right there, Frank? Mike?
I got it right.
You fire away.
All right. When to stop? We got a lot of great questions from you. Thank you very much. We'll get to as many as possible. Probably not all of them, but thank you very much. The first one is Senator Sanders. The Democratic Party used to be the party of the working class. This election, however, was largely lost to white working class voters who previously voted for President Obama, switching their vote to Donald Trump. How do we win them back?
That's something I am working on overtime. Harry Truman was Truman succeeded. That's an interesting word. Truman succeeded Franklin Delano Roosevelt, who died in office in 1945. Truman won election in 48 on his own, served in 52. Truman, it turns out, was a kind of a conservative Democrat from Missouri. But if you, and many progressives were really worried about him as president. In fact, there was a third-party progressive party effort to take him on in 1948. But if you listen to the speeches that the conservative Democrat of 1948 made in terms of taking on big money and corporate interests, there are very few Democrats today who would give the speech that a conservative Democrat gave in 1948. Now, in my view, this is in a nutshell, kind of what's happened to American politics. For a number of reasons, having to do with the power of the Koch brothers and other billionaires, the Republican Party has moved very far away from the party of Dwight D. Eisenhower, who was a moderate Republican, who in fact prided himself, campaigned on raising the minimum wage and protecting Social Security. The Republican Party today is not a center-right party, it is a right-wing extremist party. One of the ugliest aspects is not just that they want to give tax breaks to billionaires and cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. There is something else that they are very actively involved in. They understand that their agenda, and this is their agenda, and it really is, it is tax breaks for the very wealthy, despite the massive level of income and wealth inequality we currently have. And it is cuts in Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, veterans programs, privatizing the Postal Service, etc., etc. That is their agenda. They understand that that is not a popular agenda. You're never going to see anybody running for office in Georgia, or any place else for that matter, saying, vote for me, I'm going to cut Social Security and give tax breaks to billionaires. But that is precisely what their agenda is. Now, how do you get elected? Well, that's a long story, and we can get into it if somebody wants to ask me. But one thing they know is that it is imperative for them to try to keep voter turnout as low as possible. See, I believe that what democracy is about is seeing more people involved in the political process and getting money out of politics. They want more money in politics and few people vote. And in a very, very malicious and ugly way, what cowardly Republican governors and legislatures have done all over this country is under the guise of voter fraud. They're working on voter suppression, making it harder for poor people or old people to vote. In a democracy, we can have different points of view. People in this room, I'm sure, have many different points of view. But we should be ashamed that there are any public officials who are working hard to make it harder for people to participate in the political process. But that is what right-wing extremism is about. They don't have the guts to campaign on their ideas. They want to keep people from voting. So, what we are trying to do, and as I mentioned earlier, today was a good start. We are trying to create, in a sense, a very new Democratic Party. A party where candidates just don't spend all their time raising money from the wealthy, but a party which is integrated into their communities, is hearing and welcoming young people and working people into the ranks. That's not going to be easy. I am supporting a congressman from Minnesota. His name is Keith Ellison. Supporting Keith because I believe he understands the need to fundamentally transform the Democratic Party. So that is, and to answer the final point that I would make on this is it's not complicated. The Democratic Party today has got to make a very simple and fundamental decision, which goes back to a Woody Guthrie song called "Which Side Are You On?" And the truth is, you cannot represent Wall Street and the drug companies and the fossil fuel industry and the greed of corporate America and then go out and campaign and say, hey, I'm on the side of working people. It doesn't work that way. You got to make a choice. Well, Trump is a very, to say the least, interesting character. You all saw the press conference the other day, my God. But this is important to understand, it really is. And that is that Trump understood at a certain level that there were many millions of people in this country, working class people, who are really in a lot of pain. And many of them have given up on the Democratic establishment. They see some gains. I think Obama's, the economy today is better than it was 8 years ago, but they are still living in pain. They can't afford to send their kids to college. They can't afford the health care that they need. They're worried about climate change. They're worried about child care. They're worried about the future of Social Security. And Trump comes along and he says in so many words, I hear your pain. I understand that you are hurting. I, Donald Trump, I'm going to take on the entire establishment. I'm not the traditional Republican. I'm not going to cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Now that's what he said. All of that stuff, that was before Election Day. And one of the things we are doing right now, trust you me, believe me, we are reminding Mr. Trump and his friends every day. We got every bloody quote that he made. He said he would not cut Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. Well, if he is honest and maintains that view, he better get on the phone and tell his Republican colleagues who today are working on legislation that would make devastating cuts to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. And I say to Mr. Trump, if you're going to be honest with the American people, tell your Republican colleagues you're going to veto that legislation. Trump said he would take on Wall Street. That he would bring together, he would support the passage of Glass-Steagall legislation, which breaks up commercial banks and investor banks and insurance companies. Trump said that he was going to take on the pharmaceutical industry. So we will see. Those are the promises that he made, saying, I am not a traditional Republican. I'm going to stand with working people and take on the establishment. Now, don't tell anybody I happen not to believe for 1 minute anything he said. But nonetheless, we intend to hold him accountable and remind every person who voted for him what he said then, what he is doing now.
There are many people who oppose tuition-free public colleges and universities, as you have proposed. Some say they don't think working people should have to pay for the 1% of children to go to school, and others say they pay for their own education and or their kids' education, so why should they pay for everyone else's education now? What do you say to that?
Well, let's deal with it. I disagree strongly with the question. This is what I think. I think that in a competitive global economy, which is what we are in right now, if the middle class of this country is going to survive, and if our economy is going to flourish in the years to come, the simple truth is we need the best educated workforce in the world. Now, when you talk about radical ideas, please remember that 100 or so years ago, working class people came up with and pushed through a very radical idea. It's a radical idea. They said that their children, working class children, should have a right to get a free education from first grade through 12th grade. That children should not be working in factories or in fields, but that working class kids had the right, the same as the wealthy families' children, they had the right to get a good education. That was a pretty radical idea 100 or so years ago. All of you know the world has changed significantly. And today, as a result of exploding technology, today, in many respects, a college degree is the equivalent of what a high school degree was 40 or 50 years ago. That's a fact. "25 years ago or so, the United States led the world in the percentage of our people who had college degrees. We were number one. Today we are in 11th place, and we're falling behind many other countries, which does not bode well for the future of our economy in an increasingly technological age. Technology is exploding. So what I believe is pretty simple. I think we have to look at public colleges and universities the way that people 100 years ago looked at high schools. And we have got to make public colleges and universities tuition free. Now, that does a couple of things. It helps to begin to address this crisis of student debt, which is rampant all over this country. How many people in this room have student debt? Okay. We should be encouraging all of our people to get the best education that we can. But when people are worried about leaving school $30 or $50 or $100,000 in debt, we are discouraging them. So I want you to think big and to think about a nation in which all of us, not just young people, but in a changing economy, all people are able to get tuition-free the education they need to get the jobs that they need. That's number one. Number two, I grew up in a family that didn't have a lot of money. My father dropped out of school in Poland at the age of 16. My mother graduated high school. Okay? And the people that we knew, that we hung out with, our families hung out with, were in a similar situation. We knew if there was somebody in my parents who was a college graduate, it was a big deal. He went to college. Big deal. And that exists today. Low-income families hang out with low-income families. Working-class families hang out with working-class families. I want, and this is fairly revolutionary, I want every child in this country, in the 4th grade, in the 6th grade, I want the parents of those children, I want the teachers of those children to understand that if those kids do well in school, if they study hard, and they do well in school, yes, they will get a college education regardless of the income of their family. The last point that I would make is tell the person who wrote the question, it's not going to be the middle class who pays higher taxes in order to pay for making public colleges and universities tuition-free. The proposal that I brought forth called for a speculation tax on Wall Street.
The next question is a two-part question. There's really two questions, but one of them plays off what you just said, so I'll ask them both. What is some advice you give to progressives in the Deep South, like us, to change the political atmosphere in more rural parts of states like this? And what are some of the most prominent pieces of legislation that you'll be proposing in 2017?
It is, let me deal with the first question and say that it is very easy for somebody from Vermont, where in my primary, I got 86% of the vote against Secretary Clinton. And Secretary Clinton beat Trump by, I think, 25 or 30 points. So in my state, it ain't hard to be a progressive. Massachusetts, not hard to be a progressive. But in the South it is, and I have enormous respect for people that I've met in the last couple of years who are holding the torch of progressivism alive and are prepared to fight even though they are in a minority situation. Now, without going into too great a depth, I think the first thing we have got to do is to figure out a way to bring the white working class of the South into progressive politics. I'm going to be focusing a lot of attention on that. It is, I'll tell you how bad the situation is. If you were a hack governor, if you really didn't care about anything other than getting elected, and the federal government says to you, we are going to provide for your state free, without a nickel of state expenditure for the first 3 years. We're going to allow not all, but many people in your state to get Medicaid. We're going to expand Medicaid. Now, if I were a hack politician, I'd say, it's a great idea. I get all these people in, I can take credit for that. And yet in state after state, including Georgia, you have governors who, because of a right-wing ideology, deny health care, which costs the state almost nothing, to hundreds and hundreds of thousands of people. Shame. Now, the shame is here not just the decision of those governors and legislatures. The shame is that we have not been able to mobilize those hundreds of thousands of people, black and white, to stand up and say, sorry, I am going to have health care, my kids are going to have health care, and you're not going to get elected if you don't take advantage of this. I will never forget being at a meeting in a union hall in Jackson, Mississippi, a couple of years ago. And it was an extraordinary meeting. And you had black workers there, and you had white workers there, and this is exactly the issue that we discussed. And I said, tell me, how does it happen in a state like Mississippi, one of the poorest states in this country, where whether you're black or you're white, you can't afford to send your kids to college, you can't afford health care, you're earning some of the lowest wages in America. How does it happen that your state continues to elect right-wing politicians who represent the wealthy and turn their backs on working people, whether they're white or they're black? And what the answer was a four-letter word called race. That was the answer, and I think that's true in many parts of the South. So we got a lot of work to do to make sure that white workers understand that blacks are not their enemy, but Wall Street and the drug companies. Trying to figure out how they can get people to vote against their own best interest. How do you get somebody to vote for a candidate who is denying them the health insurance that their family needs? How do you do that? That's the challenge. And this is, it's easy for me to say a few words about this, but these are the kinds of things we got to be thinking about. We have to know. And I will say this, I've said this many times. I don't agree with some folks who say, well, all of those Trump people who voted for Trump, they were all racist and sexist and homophobes. I don't believe that for a second. Surely there is some of that. But I think that the vast, I'm not This is my point. The vast majority of those, if I was during my campaign, I went to a place called McDowell County, West Virginia. Anybody know that? McDowell County, West Virginia. Turns out to be one of the poorest counties in America. Used to be coal country, coal companies left. Unemployment sky high, drug addiction, crime off the charts. Donald Trump got over 70% of the vote now. So we have got to figure out a way to reach out to people, not make fun of them. These are, I had a meeting there, these are beautiful people facing difficult circumstances. And we've got to figure out a way to bring people together. They win when they divide us up. Why do you think for years candidates were running on anti-gay rights? Oh, I'm going to vote for you. Oh, you're sending my job to China? That's okay. You're anti-gay rights? You're worried about who can walk into a bathroom? Man, that's really important. We've got to make people understand that job creation, decent pay, equal pay for women, health care for all, educational opportunity for all, is more important than who goes into a bathroom, etc. That's a lot of work to do, but this is also what it's about. For those of you who are serious about politics, being serious about politics doesn't mean you're going to run for office tomorrow. That's fine. Being serious about politics means that you are prepared to go outside of the folks who think the way you do, who share your worldview. That's the hard one, and that's precisely what we have got to do. Okay, long answer to a short question.
I think we would all be happy to go on and on and on, but I think maybe this is our last question for the evening.
All right, we'll do 3 more questions.
What would be the best method of convincing our representatives, not that we have to convince our representatives, but maybe our citizens, to change their vote on an issue? Long-form reports, or providing facts, threats, and voting and funding the other party, or something else?
My memory is correct. Here in the great state of Georgia, you have 2 United States senators who voted to repeal the Affordable Care Act. Probably have a bunch in the U.S. House as well. What your job is, I can't answer that question for you as to what the tactics should be. But your job is to tell them in whatever way, to invite them to meetings just like this, and say, you know what, we want to talk about the Affordable Care Act, and we want to understand why you want to throw 20 million people off of health insurance, raise the cost of prescription drugs for seniors, privatize Medicare, and give huge tax breaks for billionaires. Maybe you'd be so kind to join us here at Georgia Tech to explain that to us. Or maybe you would be prepared. Maybe you would be prepared to engage in a debate with somebody who has a different point of view. Or maybe you're going to meet with us when we go to your office to talk about this issue, because we're coming to your office. Terrible things happen, and not just with regard to health care. When the system does not allow people to engage and understand what's going on. When you put the issues out on the table, you find these guys really do not have much to say. What they do want is you do not know what's going on, and media very often helps that situation. Or that, if you do know, you give up and you don't think there's anything you can do. All of the polling that I have seen on the Affordable Care Act says the nation is divided. Maybe half the people think it's a good idea, maybe a little bit more think they have concerns with it, they don't like it. But of those who simply want to repeal it without any alternative at all, those numbers are very, very small, which is precisely what the Republicans are doing today. So you have got to, in your own ways, for your own organizations, you have got to start putting pressure on your members of Congress. If you cannot afford it, you're going to be deeply in debt by going to college. You have got to tell them you cannot afford the high cost of college, or you're damn well not going to leave school with $50,000 in debt. And tell them why they do not support making public colleges and universities tuition free at the same time as they do support giving hundreds of billions of dollars in tax breaks to the top 1%. That's your job. And once they begin to read your emails, get your phone calls, see you in person, you know what? If they want to get reelected, they may have to change their thinking. Mouthful of a question. I mean, first off, as I said earlier, the current campaign finance system is a total disaster, and it creates a very corrupt political system in which literally, I mean, the Koch brothers, between the two of them, are worth between $80 and $100 billion. Do you think they're the second wealthiest family in America? Do you think it means anything for them to throw $300 or $400 million into campaigns if they end up benefiting at the end of it? It's like you going out to dinner, taking somebody out to dinner. It's nothing. $300 or $400 million is chump change for these guys. So what we have got to do is to work together, to end and make sure that we overthrow this Citizens United Supreme Court decision. And then secondly, what we are seeing is cities like New York City, states like Maine, we have public funding of elections. Think about how you can have that in your own state, in your own community. But this issue of big money lies at the root of everything else. Not only does it allow billionaires to buy elections, what it also does is the good guys end up spending all of their time having to raise money to counteract the money that the billionaires have. And it creates an awful, awful situation.
Now this will be our next question. With all the opposition you have faced throughout the years and all the opposition we've seen, especially during the primaries from the establishment, how do you keep your spirits up? How do you
being a young man of 35 helps. That's a great question. Let me give you the honest answer. What I have discovered over the years, and it's not a new discovery, all of you probably know that, is how you feel and the kind of energy you have is absolutely reflective upon the kind of energy that's around you. So I go to political meetings sometimes in Washington, and this is the God's truth. I feel absolutely deflated. I mean, it's like the energy blows just out of you. It's like death. It's sad. On the other hand, I had the privilege and the honor of a lifetime of taking on the establishment, taking them all on, taking on the whole Democratic establishment. You know, we got the endorsement. There are hundreds of newspapers throughout America that have the endorsement of one. I think 3% of the superdelegates, 46% of the people who are elected based on how people voted. The energy that I get, the strength that I get, without being overly romantic here, comes from you and comes from people. There is incredible beauty, and I want you all to know this, because I've had the opportunity as a senator to get around the country, be in my own state. There's a lot of beauty in this country. Beautiful, beautiful people who are not greedy, who do not think that the end all of life is to make zillions of dollars while you do terrible things to other people along the way. There are people who understand the importance of love and community, who worry about the children, who worry about the most vulnerable, whose lives expand, who see What life is about is trying to work with other people to create a better world. And, you know, when I go around the country, I cannot tell you just the beauty that I have seen. And it's something I will never forget. It's now part of me. And that is precisely the energy that keeps me going. So thank you all very much.